Okay, so this is probably for a lot of people there's going to be a little bit radical. If you don't find it radical, then then you haven't understood what I'm saying here. So a little bit my background. So these guys are my mentors, but I started out in philosophy of science, and being dissatisfied with philosophy of science, in fact, with the scientific worldview in general, because it's deterministic and so forth. I didn't see myself in a deterministic world. I morphed over into what I'm calling philosophy of engineering. And just for the record, I think philosophy of pragmatism is an early version of philosophy of engineering. A lot of stuff are exactly the same conclusions. I just think this is a better version. So this is what I'm trying to do today, quickly. So I want to talk about it. There are actually two frameworks of evolution theory. You guys might not have known that, but the Darwinian selection people, and I'm going to call the constructivist inclusion people, which is the engineering side, and the my colleagues who are constructivists, if you say anything about Darwinism, they go like, and I'm surprised at the number of people here that are still buying into Darwin, which in my opinion is not credible. Anyway, so what's come up now is I'm going to go over CRISPR, which is the new genetic engineering technology, and that's a basis for moral decisions. I don't know how moral decisions come up in deterministic models at all. They don't. But they do come up in an engineering model. They do come up in a pragmatist model. So then I'm going to explore the engineering view of evolution. It's kind of Bugliarella I'll go into, and then Hawking evolution is my exemplar, which is kind of the central theme of this. And then I'm going to go into, I think it's a little easier for people to grasp this transition to look at it in economics. And Paul Romer is my guy there. And then I'm going to emphasize two characteristics of this switch to the constructivist. One is it's systemic in a way that the Darwinian thing is not, because I'm inside the system. This is the participant part of it too. So those will become apparent hopefully. So to CRISPR and not to CRISPR. CRISPR, if you don't know, is this new genetic engineering technology that's probably, magnitudes greater, maybe a million times more powerful than any genetic technology that we've had up till now, which allows for just untold modifications of our cells and organisms. It's an example. So, and part of what I pose here is our decision about what to do with CRISPR and whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, or to have designer babies or whatever. How we make these decisions is going to depend heavily on our understanding of evolution. So if we think evolution is Darwinian, we might make decisions one way, and if we don't, we make them another way. So, this is Eugene Koonin was one of the probably half dozen people involved in the development of CRISPR. And at the 2009 celebration of Darwin's the publication of Origin of Species, this is what he says, not to mince words, the modern neo-Darwinian synthesis is gone. What's next is the only relevant question. And more recent thing, this is from Dennis Noble, which a lot of people refer to. So all the basic assumptions underlying the modern synthesis and neo-Darwinism have been proved wrong, empirically wrong, but people ignore that, but it's true. So what we need here is a paradigm change. And the important part of paradigm change in this case is it's going towards a more general understanding. So it's not that it's rejecting the Darwinian thing so much, it's just saying the Darwinian thing is a very limited way of looking at things, and there's a more general one. It's like flat earth theory to round earth theory. It's not that the flat earth theory was wrong. Well, it is wrong, but I'm able to understand why people would have believed that. And same we do with Darwinism. So this is my buddy Peter Corning. There's a paradigm shift underway from the atomistic, reductionist, gene-oriented, mechanistic model to a systems perspective in which purposeful actions are fundamental properties of living organisms at all levels. Highly recommend this most recent book, Synergistic Selection. If he said synergistic construction, we would be together. But Peter and I have been interacting for 30 years, and we have this, he doesn't quite get to agency, which I think is fundamental. It's a book of mine. It's really background to this stuff. So anyway, the paradigm shift that I'm talking about is from the scientific research program to an engineering research program. If you want to follow up on some of the stuff, we have Institute has a YouTube channel which is called the Linus Pauling Memorial Lectures, and I've got a couple of my lectures, and this one hopefully will go up there as well. So major background theme, this problem of this dealing with Hawking revolution is that it's embedded in this larger theme. And our larger theme from this constructivist point of view is that biological evolution and social economic evolution are engineering enterprises, and this entails the need for a paradigm shift to a systemic and participatory framework. Being by participatory, it's like, oh, we're part of evolution, we're involved in it. The idea that we're not players in that is one of the embarrassments of the Darwinian thing. So the constructivist engineering thing, a couple of points. From the constructivist point of view, evolution is not an adaptation and is not selective. So what's life adapting to? I mean, a niche of the day or what? I mean, it's just, they try to press people in the Darwinian, well, it's, what is the parameter of evolution? Well, it's change. They have no answer to this stuff. It's all nonsense. So from the engineering point of view, evolution is emergent, and it's a constructive process, and it's inclusive, not selective, through expanding capability and opportunity, which I'll go into more, and that it favors the poor and the disabled and the old, which I will go into. So my favorite guys, this is George Bulgarello. George is kind of like engineer's engineer. He was on every committee, National Committee of Engineers, what's going on, and so forth. So George says, modern engineering is a natural extension of biological evolution. So it seems obvious in a way. I mean, he's saying that engineers should be taught that what they're doing is just a natural extension of evolution. In other words, we are a product of evolution, and we're doing. So if you need a worldview in which engineering makes sense, which it doesn't in the scientific worldview. Now, why would anyone doubt that? So give you this idea of this conflict that comes between these. So I pick on type 1 diabetes, just sorry. But it used to be that people with type 1 diabetes would die 12, 14, 16 years old. Rarely did they reproduce, and it just kept coming up, but it's there. Now we have insulin technology, okay? Now these people live, pretty full lives. I have a friend of my son is now, I don't know, he's in his 30s, he's married, he's got a child, he's going great. He manages his type 1 diabetes, which he's had forever, with insulin, and now we're getting insulin pumps and making it all sorts of easier. Now, great. So these people who were not reproducing are now reproducing. So one can speculate here that the people who were getting type 1 diabetes had some sort of genetic weakness, okay? So that genetic weakness now used to just die out. That genetic weakness now is going through the gene pool. It's spreading quite well. And so you would think, well, this is maybe not so good that we're doing this. So if you think about it, though, those of us who wear glasses, we're in the same position. So the people with bad eyesight difficulties and disabilities, now we have eyeglasses and we can manage it and we do quite well, but it was a disability, it was a disadvantage. So that disability and disadvantage now gone through, working its way through the gene pool. Is that good or is that bad? Okay, so, and we might go back further and say advances in agriculture, going back. So advances in agriculture, how many people that are alive today would survive in a hunter-gatherer environment? Not many, I would say. So there's something about what engineering seems to be doing, what technological advances seem to be doing, is like battling the forces of natural selection, you might say. In fact, it's going in the opposite direction. So this history of technological innovations is in fact expanding the potential for, if you like, weaker and weaker people to survive and thrive. So this is so. What's the evidence for this? I say, well, so I've just given you a couple of examples, and you can just go back through any of any technology that's come up. There's people who are able to use that they might not have been able to be as effective in society or in their lives without that technology. Stephen is a buddy of mine, so I call this Hawking evolution. He's a big promoter of accessibility. Oops. I organized a few lectures, public lectures for Stephen, and every place we went, he would meet with students with disabilities, and he's kind of the poster child for the importance of including disabled people in the economy and stuff. And of course, we've done a tremendous amount in terms of giving access. I know Microsoft and Intel have both been enormously committed, and they're buddies of Hawking's. They supplied him with all his stuff too. So we do a lot of that, and hopefully this is going to go forward. Come on, dude. This is the previous one was in Portland. This is in Seattle. He's giving a talk to. They broadcast it all over the British Columbia. Talk. There's 200 students with disabilities there. This is in Seattle. He's meeting with some kids at Seattle University. Anyway, so that's why I call it Hawking evolution. Oops. Oh, wait a minute. I guess this will come up. Keep thinking this is just gonna. There it is. Okay, one more. Okay, so this is Tim White's colleague of mine. So Tim just goes further with this. He goes like, okay, so let's go backwards here a little bit. And so he's saying everything that there's ideas of, oh well, evolution has occurred because there were climate changes, or we came out of the trees onto the savanna or something. It's like, it's not getting anywhere. So the real advances have all been technological. Okay, so I have my example here. So this is a picture of Lucy, who was 3 million years ago. Tim was involved in that a little bit, and Lucy was early hominid and getting around. Now, how did we get from Lucy to this other person? Kara Cooney is a friend. She's a professor of Egyptology at UCLA. Very smart, sharp-looking woman. So how do we get? I mean, does Carol look like a fitter Lucy? I mean, I don't think so. So how do we get there? So my suggestion here is that when the weaker are surviving, okay, it diversifies the gene pool, and then there's some sort of morphogenesis that goes through the gene pool that leads to actual evolution. So actual evolution requires actually the survival of the weaker, and the weaker, so to speak, becoming part of the gene pool, and that's how evolution actually occurs. So these another point to make is that these technological innovations are not adaptations. They're not adapting us to anything. There's no adaptation going on. They're emergences. They're building on things. They're coming from things. Tattersall emphasizes the importance of language, and I think as Russell Wallace, Darwin's other side, that had this expression, "more than nature needs." And the idea, if you actually look at these technologies, they're not adaptations to anything that's pre-existing stuff. They're actually growth and their development. There's an expansion of opportunity and capacity. So the whole idea of adaptation is seriously misguided. This is a really great book by a colleague of mine, Biological Emergences, Evolution by Natural Experiment. Very pragmatist sort of attitude. So we're agents in the world, okay, and we're experimenting, and that's how we discover these. You don't deduce innovations or inventions. You have to discover them. You have to go find out where they are. So life is not adapting, and it's not selective or convergent. Life is, sort of like, is life converging to this ultimate adaptation? Which doesn't make any sense. Or is it rising from? So we're going from. Okay. So it's constructive. So, and Reed tries to suggest a parameter. So it's one of the interesting things about this whole direction is, what is the parameter of evolution? What is this more what? Where are we going? Because we're not adapting, but where is it going? Is there a parameter, more or what? Okay, he suggests increasing adaptability which is kind of good, but it's increasing ability to perform work. Now, this has a lot of baggage with it because it's work in the engineering sense, and it has a qualitative aspect to it, but also has a range. So it means that I can do more things. I have more power to do more things, but I can do a larger range of things. In other words, I have greater ability to go and explore and do new things, ask new types of questions, and so forth. So the reason there's a measurement problem is because it's a qualitative advance. So there's no scientific measure of this. Okay, this measurement problem, I happen to be reading Plato's dialogue, The Statesman, where they go through. And this question of measuring progress goes way back. Okay, so if you say, what's the parameter of evolution? Well, there is no scientific answer to that because it is a qualitative progression, but that can be panned out in different ways. So now, when I was getting back to the CRISPR part, and that is simply that the way in which we understand we're going to deal with CRISPR questions and with all this enormous genetic technology potential that we have is we have to look at our theory, and if we're trying to make our judgments based on some sort of Darwinian nonsense, we're going to run into the whole Malthusian thing in eugenics, and the Darwinians say, oh, we're not eugenicists, but it's implicit in the Darwinian model, the fitness thing, where there's ultimate scarcity and competition, and it's survival of the fittest and greater reproduction and stuff like that. Well, I think it's all garbage, and it's erroneous. Another version of that, Dawkins was a disaster with his selfish gene thing. Dawkins, however, kind of caught Dawkins' revelation, and that his revelation was in an extended genotype, and where he realizes that in order to get ahead in for his genes to get ahead, he needs the rest of the ecosystem as well. So as the ecosystem develops, he wants the ecosystem to develop so his genes can develop or something. So it becomes very ambiguous whether he's promoting himself or he's promoting other things. He moves towards a kind of a systems ecology. Unfortunately, Dawkins doesn't have the intestinal fortitude to admit that he was wrong at the time. But if you read him, he kind of says he is. So some of the guys I work with in the constructivist program is the origins of life people at the deep sea vents sort of stuff, and they're all constructivists. I mean, they're all going like, it's where they're seeing it going from chemicals to probiotic or to prokaryotes to eukaryotes, and they see a constructive process. They don't see a Darwinian process here at all. So Martin says. Has this comment. He says, if Darwinian evolution works like a tinker, evolution with mitochondria works like a corps of engineers. And he's talking about when we move from prokaryotes to eukaryotes. Eukaryotes are 200,000 times more capable of performing work, of doing different things. They can explore making new kinds of proteins and all sorts of stuff. So there's great expansion, and they're not adapting to going from prokaryotes to eukaryotes is not an adaptation to anything. Get over it. So again, Martin says the transition to complex life hinged on a unique endosymbiotic biogenetic jump rather than on natural selection acting on mutations accumulated. So they think that this is obviously evidence against the Darwinian thing. Nick Lane is sort of the mouthpiece of this group to some extent. Good book, without a question. Another guy in this game, Falkowski, has a great deal. He says one rule of they have these things are in consortia. So you have one bacterial group are using sulfur at +3 and export it at -5. The other one loves it at -5 and uses it and exports it at -. So they have these consortia that are going on, and they are also productive. But he said one of the key rules of being in a consortia is you don't want to outcompete the other side, because he's feeding you. Okay, and this gives you again this sense of this systemic character of the constructivist model. It's also very thermodynamic and engine. So, okay, another one. If you Lovelock goes through all this stuff, and the Earth is a dynamic non-equilibrium. In one sense, it's an equilibrium. It has this nice equilibrium aspects like homeostasis, just like a body. This was part of the Gaia hypothesis. But it's also a non-equilibrium, which means that there's all sorts of stuff going on. There's all sorts of, there's O2 and the CO2 people. These are like a consortium. They're kind of feeding each other going on. They're stable, but they're also productive and they're evolving. Dorian Sagan and Snyder. Snyder's an ecology guy. So they talk about this in engineering terms, the idea of an engine, some of the sun going out. And the basic idea is it's like the Newcomen engine and then this early steam engines and then just different engines have developed over time and they have increasing capacity to perform work. And the idea is this is, the biosphere is an engine and it's increasing its capacity. Okay, so this is the paradigm shift again from a scientific framework where you have action-reaction symmetry. It's a zero-sum game, to the engineering framework which is constantly symmetry breaking. There's an irreversibility in all change, and there's a net productive outcome, and that production is cumulative. Now I'm going to take a shot at this. I'm going to go, I know I've got zero, but I'm going to just go ahead. Questions there. So, because I think it's easier to understand this in economics. So the big question in economics has been, is economics a science? And if it's a zero-sum game, it's like it should just stay at this equilibrium point. But they started observing in like 1800 that this is happening. So why is this equilibrium point going up? There's nothing it's not due to economic activity, because economic activity is always going towards the equilibrium. So so for instance, in 1850, in the U.S., we were producing 2 bushels of corn per acre per farmer. By 1950, it was 200. And Schumpeter, so why is this happening? Well, Schumpeter is first going to say, well, it's the technology. And everybody goes like, oh, yeah, it's the technology. But what's technology? Well, technology is not a product for these scientific guys. It's not a product of economic activity. Economic activity is just supply, demand, just stays there. So what is it? Well, I say, well, it's an exogenous factor. Like this, there can be fluctuations in that, kind of like you get hit by a storm, you have a good year and crop years, but those are just fluctuations around the equilibrium point. What we're observing here is something else. But since innovations are not predictable, they consider them to be exogenous. Okay, and Solo called them manna from heaven. And okay, so the revolution comes with this guy Paul Romer, just got the 2018 Nobel Prize in economics, and his paper endogenous technology. So Paul, so it's instead of saying this is what economic system do, he goes like this. They're going like this. So there's, just like with that picture of the Earth, there is a homeostasis there, and equilibrium in economics is nice, but it's not what I'm doing. Okay, what I'm doing is actually creating wealth. I'm producing things. I'm developing the system, and it's a constructivist deal. So, great book by David Warsh on all this stuff. One of Paul's things is ideas are crucial here. So, normally we think of products as supply-demand thing was all material things. It was like how much land and water and sort of land capital and labor you're putting into things. Those are normal ideas of growth. And he says, no, ideas are actually a product. He talks about why would anyone ever invest in an R&D? So he always sees the production of ideas and innovations as something internal to the system. And we get increasing returns. And so an expression is, it's not how much land or gold or silicon or whatever you have, it's what you do with it. So evolution and growth are the same chemicals here. So what's going on there? Okay, so it's the different ways of dealing with it, different designs and so forth. So just one example is like, well, 10 years ago I had to spend $100 to put another gigabyte of RAM in my computer. He said, now I can get a gigabyte of RAM for $10. And he says, and I didn't do anything. Point being, somebody in my ecosystem invented a way to produce RAM chips cheaper, and I benefited. And he goes like, so, guess what? It's in my interest that other people in my ecosystem succeed. This is sort of Dawkins' revelation, if you like. So this is, again, this shift to a systemic deal. To me, it's also the ethical thing in this is that when I first looked at it, it's in my interest that you succeed, I thought, this kind of sounds like the golden rule kind of turned into a ecosystem. The bad guys in this are the limits to growth people who think it's all about material growth, and no, it's about growth in ideas and innovations and increasing capacity to perform work. We don't need any more material or more land, more water, or anything. It's just like what we do with it. Okay, and the result of this, because this process is net productive, also it's cumulative. So, an example of the person who figured out how to do clear glass was in Florence, Italy, and back in 15 something or other. And you think of all the benefits of clear glass. That's one technology. These technologies build on each other and they accumulate. And so where are we today? We got all this technology around here. I didn't invent it. Did you invent it? No. Well, it's just accumulated. And it gives us, so we're in a situation of considerable abundance. One of the arguments here, a friend of mine at UCLA says, population is, in my lifetime, population has doubled. And he said economic output has increased eightfold. Eightfold. This is the exact opposite of what Malthus was saying. So in fact, I would say something like nobody ever starved on Earth for lack of food. Being here, they may not have been able to get to it. So this is kind of just a list, So people who are, if you want to follow up on this, people who are along this line, Ramiz Nam has a couple of great books. One I love is called The Infinite Resource, The Power of Ideas on a Finite Planet. And if you want to go into this, he goes into this in some detail, very conscious of Romer as well. Another great book, What Technology Wants. Technology is a living force that can expand our individual potential if we listen to what it wants. I would have preferred if he called it What Engineering Wants, but that's okay. And this is also one of the geniuses, McDonough, and he says the upcycle. And upcycling is looking at nature and saying, the reindeer poop on the plain, but it's not just accumulating poop because the bacteria use it, and that grows grass and so forth. And so there's this cyclic stuff. He had another book called on the cyclic economy, which is very big. So part of it is beyond sustainability. He says, no, point is not sustainability here, guys. So he says sustainability is like getting up each day and asking how I can be less bad. What's important is designing for abundance. Okay, and so this is just the same conclusions where I started, and there you have it. A couple of minutes for questions if we have it.
Okay. So, as you said, we do have a short time for questions. Anybody want to get into this?
Sure.
Go ahead, Anna.
I have a question concerning insulin, because I work and live in Germany and have health insurance and all of that, and a lot of people in this time, but in other regions of the world, don't have health insurance, don't
Yes.
have insulin available.
Yes.
I have the impression that this engineering perspective is pretty centered on industrialized areas of the world.
Not necessarily. Maybe an example is I think of I'm in Africa. Imagine I'm in Africa, and now I have a cell phone powered by solar panels.
Okay.
Okay, so it's spreading. There's a whole question in the economics history and others is why there hasn't been more of what's called convergence. In other words, according to standard theory, with the trade and everything, that it should have come out, everybody should be at even level, and they're not. And the question is why and how do we do that? All sorts of interesting questions there, but it's not focused that way. And it's also the case that any advance anywhere is an advance for the system, turns out. So that's a different argument. It's a sort of Kantian argument about the nature of knowledge too. Anyway, yeah.
I'm wondering if you're making the argument that CRISPR is essentially equivalent to eyeglasses or wheelchairs or something.
No.
In terms of it's another modification that can then help people.
CRISPR is more like agricultural technology or something, and it's a technology that is all of a sudden opening up possibilities. So I think of the Egyptians who, what are all those Egyptians doing? There's all sorts of stuff. Why were they able to do pyramids and embalmings and all this? Because they had made this huge expansion of their agricultural potential. And so then they had all this excess stuff, so the way they started doing stuff with it. So CRISPR, well, the question for me with CRISPR is, do we want to, I mean, the first thing we're going to do with CRISPR is we're going to get rid of all the problems in the gene pool, okay? They're already doing that. I mean, it might be in your family. Yeah.
Okay, so this can go on. Sorry, I know we have more questions, but as
Yeah, I'm here.
As chairman of the session, I am selecting against it continuing.
All right.
So, time for lunch.
Yeah, well, they can
You guys
go,
can continue talking, but the session's officially over.
yeah. Do you want to ask a question up there? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just wondering about this assumption sort of wrapped up in the term weakness. So you're talking about potential like weaknesses spreading in the gene pool.
Yes.
Like diabetes. And-
Eyeglasses.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we have the technology to address, for example, something like diabetes. Can you call it a weakness anymore? I mean, like maybe in the Pleistocene was a weakness, but maybe it's not a weakness. It's just like having a eye.
Well, I mean, the whole idea of weakness is something that's in the Darwinian, coming out of the Darwinian. I like, one of the places this go, the whole overall picture that comes out of this is, in fact, evolution's about, the problem-solving context of evolution is actually morality. And if you look at, I like the Tao Te Ching, and you see it in the Bible, this idea of non-judgmentalism. And that's part of the inclusion thing. So I would take your point and say, well, no, there are no weaknesses. They're just, they're differences. And you get at things like, consider this, why should we be, from a Darwinian point, why should we be helping the old people who are unproductive? Okay. I mean, think about that. There's no practical rationale for that. There's simply no practical rationale. I mean, this is one of the things that come to me more powerfully out of this. Compassion. There's no justification on a cost-benefit basis for compassion. But, so there's got to be, I mean, that's pushing me beyond this. It's pushing me to a bigger picture. And I think that's a sort of something like compassion is a sort of thing that pushes people towards religion. I have, in my extended family, people who are very anti-science send their kids off to religious colleges and stuff like that. And I'm going like, why? What are they doing? Because they have an intuition about science. Someone said, like, the problem with science is it's teaching our kids that life is meaningless. You got a point. So they have this intuition that there's a bigger picture. And I think that if you look at the evidence for compassion and things like that, I mean, there's stuff like tit for tat. It doesn't work out. I mean, look, just when you go out, start looking around at all the amount of money and effort we spend to include and help people with disabilities. It's enormous at this point, and it's growing, and we always have. I mean, you can go back, the paleo guys go back, and there's evidence that we were taking care of people, sick people and injured people and so forth way back. Why don't you just kill them off? They're a drain on the system. No, there's something more going on. There's something more going on here, and that is a huge amount of evidence that simply doesn't fit with a Darwinian model. So there's the descriptive and there's the prescriptive. I mean, Malthus just said, "Let the poor die." They're just a waste of time. A bunch of losers anyway. Just get rid of them. And of course, the Nazis, picked up on all that stuff. And I think that Darwinian people have a serious question to address. All these modern questions about decisions in CRISPR and all these other things is, like, are you guys still talking survival of the fittest? What are you talking about? What is evolution to you? I think they're in an impossible, or they're in a difficult, embarrassing, if you like, disgusting situation, because they're still talking survival of the fittest. This is an alternative, and this is going to grow and come up, I believe. I'm available if anyone wants to get more.
Thank you very much, everyone.